All right. I think we did enough preamble as far as this matchup. Let's just kind of dive into it. Obviously, Clemson coming in at 10-3, ACC champs, all the like. Texas coming in at 11-2, SEC runner up, and the first or the fifth seed, I guess. Um, I want to start with, and we kind of talked about it at the beginning. I want to, start on the offensive side of the football for Texas, and kind of what have you guys noticed about this group? Because in a lot of ways, they've been an extremely efficient offense. They have a really strong offensive line. Obviously, Quinn Ewers at quarterback. And a really, really dynamic group of receivers. I know, the running game has been kind of a up and down thing with just the rotation at running back with injuries and the like. But this is a pretty complete offense as far as a really good tight end as well, and Gunnar Helm as well. Um, what do you guys see in this matchup that concerns you, or that you feel confident about on the offensive side of the football, and kind of how they've played up to this point, and how it's going to translate on Saturday?
So my number one concern, and this just isn't a Georgia thing, because there are things Georgia does to us that no other team so far has done. I think other teams in the playoff will be able to exploit it, but it's the red zone. And it's because it's not just a Georgia thing, it's been a 2-year thing. So Steve Sarkisian's second year, because again, I always throw out a coach's first year. I don't really care what they do their first year, but his second year, we were 22nd in red zone scoring. Last year, we were 79th in red zone scoring. For like, just that blows my mind. And then this year we're 106, so we've actually gotten worse at red zone scoring. And just to go back to last year real quick, Iowa, for God's sakes, was 80th, so Iowa was only one worse than us last year. If just to put that in perspective again too, so when we played Georgia and Texas A&M the last 6 quarters, we have over 600 yards of offense. That has only gotten us 16 points. We move the ball between the 20s easily versus anybody. Anybody will move it easily, but we do not score in the red zone. And I don't know what the reason for that is. I don't know if it's a Steve Sarkisian issue. I don't know if it's a Quinn Ewers issue. I don't know if it's a combination of both. I don't know if it's lack of run game and a real, truly talented running back there, because we don't have that CJ Baxter like we thought we were going to have coming into this year. So that's what concerns me the most going forward with this offense. And then also, we need explosive plays, because if you're not scoring in the red zone, you need to score on those 30, 40, 50-yard chunk plays. Our most explosive wide receiver probably misses this game. So that's also concerning with Isaiah Bond out. So that's my biggest concern going into this game.
Yeah, and I think, Bond, as much as he is a talent when he's healthy, he hasn't been healthy since the first Georgia game, I think, and it's almost been a detriment. You saw the first interception Quinn Ewers threw in the SEC championship game. That actually wasn't on Ewers. Ewers put the ball in the right spot. Bond just couldn't pivot on that ankle, and the cornerback got there first. Like that. That's the kind of stuff that it's almost, I don't want to say addition by subtraction by a guy like Isaiah Bond, but like he's the kind of guy, if his leg is attached, he's going to try to play. And sometimes that becomes a detriment when you're at a position that requires that level of finesse like he has. But I think like Matthew mentioned, the run game is the thing that really concerns me. Clemson's still got dudes, right? Like the defense has struggled in some spots this year, but Clemson's still got dudes, and Texas has not been consistent running the ball. And that's really where Texas, if you look at like the split stats for like wins and losses and kind of their biggest wins and their closest losses, when Texas has run the ball really well, Texas has won really big. And so that to me is the thing that is going to set the matchup for Texas. And ultimately it also opens up Quinn Ewers. He's had some struggles, but he's best in the play action game. He can sell the play action really well. He can push the ball down the field and put it in the right spot where he needs to. And so if Texas can't run the ball successfully at any point in the field, the offense is not going to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about this Texas offense coming in, and just full transparency for the Clemson Tigers, the one, or probably the most glaring defense of issue for this Clemson Tiger team is the run defense. We've allowed a lot of explosive plays through the run game. Our ends haven't been particularly good at setting the edge outside of a TJ Parker, but he's one guy on the defensive end group. He can't do it all, although he tries to. I think he's got a record of 6 forced fumbles so far this season, a Clemson Tiger record for the program. But that's been something that this Clemson Tigers defense has struggled with. I know Texas has marginally gotten a little bit better as the season's gone on with the running game. Do you see any sort of wrinkles that a Steve Sarkisian is going to put in to try to challenge this Clemson Tigers defense? Again, I talk about the ability or the inability to set the edge for the Clemson Tigers. Are they going to try to go to maybe like an outside zone look or bring in an Arch Manning? Are they going to put in packages for him because he's an athletic quarterback? And if you've looked at Clemson's defense so far this season, we've struggled with the athletic quarterbacks. It's a fact of the matter. It's very evident if you've watched specifically the past few games, the past 2 games specifically for the Clemson Tigers, we struggled with the athletic quarterback. So what are your guys' thoughts on the wrinkles that Steve Sarkisian could add to the running game because of Clemson's weakness there? And then maybe a sighting of Arch Manning and how pivotal is he going to be or that he could be in this game against the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, so on the outside zone thing, that is the bread and butter of the Steve Sarkisian offense. That and screens. It's outside zone and screens. If you can stop those two, the only team that has is Georgia, you can win the football game. If you can't, it's going to be a pretty long day. And the setting of the edge there is very interesting because if he's the only guy that can do it, they're just going to run away from him and go to the other edge and just do it all day long. I mean, that's what's funny about this team. So Arkansas, for example, that's a dogfight. And then as soon as they tie the game, we decide, you know what, we can run outside zone 15 plays in a row, go down and score a touchdown. And we did exactly that. And I'm like, okay, if that was so good, why didn't we just do that the whole damn game?
Yeah.
But, it worked out. And that's going to be the key. If you guys can set the edge, force the run back inside off the outside zone, you'll win the football game. I said that on our channel. If they stop running the screens, they'll win the game because guess what? The 2 teams or the 2 games that worked where the team stopped it were Georgia and they won the game. So my brain tells me if Clemson does it, they'll probably win the game.
Yeah, and I think Clemson, like I mentioned, has athletes. They have dudes, and that's the thing that Georgia brought to the table as well, is that they were able to out-athlete Texas as far as like quickness, agility, run fits, those types of things. If your running back can't find a seam, if your running back can't make himself small and get through it, the amount of zone blocking you do doesn't really matter. So, Clemson still has dudes. Blue chip ratio is there. Like they didn't forget how to coach football in Clemson, South Carolina. So they're going to be prepared for that. I'm sure of it. As far as the Arch Manning thing, it has gotten, at least in the 2 times you've seen it, it's becoming a little predictable, I think, is my big gripe with it. I think they're going to have to mix in some pass plays if they're going to do it, just to keep you from being able to key on, okay, Arch is in, watch the zone read.
They're running the football.
So that to me is the big question, is do they add some wrinkles? I said it on our show, like I would love to see like a little Tebow style jump pass from him just to get people guessing, but that's just me being feisty. But yeah, I would imagine they'd bring in some of that Arch stuff, especially if Quinn's ankle is still kind of giving him issues. I would anticipate seeing Arch Manning for at least probably 5 or 10 snaps in the game.
And what I'd also love to see is it's probably not going to happen. What we did last year, for whatever reason, we ran a lot of 13 personnel with Malik Ogbo as like a jumbo tight end. He's like a backup offensive lineman. We have not done that at all this year. I don't understand why we didn't, because it worked phenomenally last year. I'm wondering if because Paul Chris left, he was an analyst for us last year, if that was more of his wrinkle, but it worked. It should have been used this year. I'm hoping Sark pulls that out for this game. Maybe has 5 to 7 plays in this game where we use it because you can run play action off that. It also just helps, in the run game a lot too, having an extra basically offensive lineman out there.
And you guys mentioned that, and with how Texas runs their offense, it's going to put a lot of stress, I think, for Clemson, not just on the edge, but, at linebacker.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure if you've done research on Clemson's defense, that, they have some pretty high caliber names at linebacker, Barrett Carter, Wade Woodaz, of course, the true freshman, Sammy Brown. But they've really largely been underwhelming this year. And that's the thing that has been really, really shocking for me, especially with, depth-wise, that was always kind of a concern coming into the season, and, you have one of your backup linebackers in Kobe McLeod tear his ACL early in the year. That certainly didn't help. But just the lack of ability to fit the run, I think at times from the second level in this linebacker group in particular has made me really concerned with this matchup, and teams that have successfully run outside zone and stretch plays on Clemson have taken advantage of that. Louisville, I think, is the I think if I'm Steve Sarkisian, I'm salivating watching that Louisville film, because Louisville didn't have a super dynamic mobile quarterback in Tyler Shuck. Like he's not that kind of guy. But they lined it up and they just outgapped Clemson over and over and over again. And obviously Isaac Brown is a fantastic running back, but it was really, really shocking to see. And I think just throughout this season, you've seen teams have been able to establish the run game and especially the outside run game. And these linebackers have not always been as sound in terms of their run fits as you would hope they would be. So, when I look at this matchup, you're going to need a really big game from Barrett Carter. I mean, not just in the run game, but also, he's probably going to have to cover, one of Texas's really good tight, especially Gunnar Helm. Like, he's a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams. And so it's going to put a lot of stress on him. And it makes me wonder how much we see of Sammy Brown in this game, because I mentioned him earlier. When Sammy Brown has been in the football game, when Clemson has had three linebackers, they've been a lot better at stopping the run. Just to put that bluntly, I mean, against South Carolina, they kind of switched to a 4-3. Traditionally we would typically only have two linebackers, but they really wanted to stop the run, and they did. Sammy led the team in tackles and tackles for loss. He has 5 sacks on the season. So, from a personnel decision standpoint, when you take him out of the game in that fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden South Carolina is running it down your throat, and Lenora Sellers is breaking off huge chunk runs, it makes you wonder kind of what are we doing here? So, that's another wrinkle that I'm interested to see from the Clemson side of things, as far as how much do we see of Sammy Brown? Because, of course, if you want to have 3 linebackers on the field, that does mean you have to take a DB off the field. And obviously Texas has really, really talented wide receivers. Even with Isaiah Bond potentially not playing, like they have some really dynamic guys on the outside.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a really big test for the linebackers, and of course, the corners, who I think have honestly played well for the most part this year. But this is a step up in competition as far as just the caliber of athlete that they're going to be facing on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And look, that's what happens when you take your leading tackler off the field in the fourth quarter, and you piss away a 10-point lead to your rivals. And there's really no explanation for it. The coaches have been asked multiple times, and there's been no good explanation given for it. But leaving that behind, this is going to be, I truly think, is going to be a game of adjustments between a Clemson Tiger team and a Texas Longhorn team. Specifically, Steve Sarkisian. This guy's an offensive mind. He's very creative. They use a lot of window dressing. They use a lot of motion. They use a lot of pre-snap stuff to try to figure out what the defense is doing. So it's really going to come down to, I think, a chess match between Steve Sarkisian and a Wes Goodwin, and who's going to win out. Who's going to be the guy that makes the better adjustments? Who's going to be the guy that ends up limiting what the other team does well? And that's how's it going to go? It's anybody's guess, right? Obviously, the lean is for the offense, because it's just a little bit easier to scheme things on offense. You're always reacting and adjusting and doing things to try to catch up on defense. So you tend to give the nod to the offensive side of the ball, especially when you have a mastermind behind there like a Steve Sarkisian. And Jordan, you mentioned the 3-backer look that we've gone to, and ever since Sammy Brown has become a more prominent player on the defensive side of the ball as far as playing closer to starter snaps, he's led the team in tackles every single game. That's been the case. So I think he's going to be an important piece in the Clemson defense. The secondary is going to be challenged. I mean, this Texas offense has athletes all over the field. They have speed. They're going to challenge Clemson sideline to sideline with the screen passes. They're going to challenge them in the running game. They're going to challenge them at the receiver and cornerback positions. So it's really going to be a chess matchup between, Wes Goodwin and a Steve Sarkisian. And I think it's going to be really fun to watch. And it's going to be one of those things where both sides are probably going to win their fair share. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to crunch time when those key drives happen, whose athletes can out athlete the other guys, right? Who can out execute the other guys, I think is what this game comes down to. And yeah, I ask you guys, this Texas offense, as good as they have been at points and times this season, and as good as Quinn Ewers has been at points in time in his career and this season, you talk about the red zone struggles. You talk about the inability to finish drives. So I looked into the Texas offense a little bit. 7 turnovers in the last 3 games. Where is that coming from specifically? Why do you guys see that as the kind of the reasons that is happening? And, what is your outlook on a successful day for the Texas offense? What does that look like against this Clemson Tiger defense?
So my number one concern, and it going back, I don't know, a month and a half now, Jaden Blue fumbled twice. I forget versus what team it was. But at that point, when he had fumbled twice, he fumbled once every 40 touches. Since then, it has gotten worse. It is once every 29 touches.
Oh,
he is one of the most dynamic players I have ever seen at Texas. One-on-one, you will not get him down. Not going to happen. I don't care who it is. It's not going to happen. He'll juke you out of your shoes. But if you can get him, he probably has a good chance of fumbling the ball. That's when you mentioned that TJ Parker thing. That scares the absolute hell out of me, because if you go for that ball, he will give it up. He does not carry it very well. So that's number one. Number two, Quinn Ewers, sometimes it's like lackadaisical is how the best way I describe it. Like, you know what? I think I can get it in there. Let's loft it up. And there's no urgency behind it. It's just like, you know what? I think I can get in there. Let's loft it up. Then there's 2 examples. That Georgia game, lofts it up. I believe Daniel Harris hits him right in the hands. It was like a punt, basically. He drops it. A&M, Bryce Anderson runs down, about to make a pick, goes right through his hands. Gunnar Helm catches it. That one had a little bit more juice behind it, but those are the 2 things with the turnovers, and those have to change, especially the Jaden Blue one. The Jaden Blue one is super frustrating. Because the guy is the most talented running back we have. Even when CJ Baxter is healthy, I think that's the case, but he just fumbles too often.
I think, and I don't know if I've ever shared this, but I think something happened and changed in the way he delivers the ball after he hurt his shoulder, kind of collarbone situation 2 years ago against Alabama. And I don't know if he's fully figured out how to put the ball in the same spots in the same ways that he used to. I think his body mechanics have to change. His feet get lazy at times, but he was able to get by on that because he had such a cannon on his, attached to his shoulder. And I think something may have shifted. There's always these little nagging injuries. The oblique injury this year is going to change the way he's had to deliver the ball. And so I think there's some of that. I also think, and I'm trying to find a nice way to say this, and he said it about himself, Quinn Ewers is kind of a head case sometimes. He is a self-admitted perfectionist. He kind of gets in his own head sometimes. And so you can tell pretty early on what Quinn Ewers we're going to get. And sometimes it's based on the scripting. Like if Steve Sarkisian scripts the game in a way where you get him 3 or 4 quick, easy completions early, and he starts to get into a rhythm, then you'll probably pretty likely get the good Quinn Ewers. If Sark comes out and dials up some deep shots early and they don't land, then I think we're going to get a shaky Quinn Ewers game. And so I think it's a combination of having to relearn some of his body and still having to figure that out. He was a kid that in high school could just roll up and be the most talented kid on the field by just virtue of, again, the God-given right arm he has. And I think he lost some of that with the injury and the repeated injuries he's had to his upper body. And so he's having to relearn some of that. And then also, again, getting him in a spot where he feels confident, he feels comfortable. He's been meeting with a sports psychologist trying to figure out what's going on between the ears. And so I think it's a combination of those two things with him specifically. And then with the red zone stuff, some of it's play calling. Like you mentioned Steve Sarkisian being a savant. Sometimes I think Steve Sarkisian is too smart for his own good in some of those red zone calls. Or you'll see he'll have a matchup he likes, but for some reason he's going to call a fade from 4 yards out, and he'll do it 2 times in a row because he likes the matchup. Like that makes me want to pull my hair out. I braid it so I can't. But like that's the kind of stuff that it's a combination of Sark kind of getting almost too smart, too cute for his own good, and then the execution mistakes happen from there.
Yeah. Wow. And it's when you mentioned, Sark kind of getting in his own head or Quinn Ewers getting in his own head and Sark sometimes, outsmarting himself, it kind of reminds me so much of, Clemson's own, coordinators at times, and I guess this is a good time to transition to the other side of the football because we've been talking about the defense or offense and defense for a while, but the matchup between Clemson's offense and Texas's defense, I think, is ultimately going to be the deciding factor in whether or not this is a dogfight or Texas is bullying Clemson in the second half and kind of pulling away.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at this Texas defense, they are one of the, like, I don't, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but as an outside observer, they are one of the most complete units, regardless of offense or defense in all of college football. This is a very, very talented, athletic unit and physical up front. Really, really good in the second and third level, in closing space and in coverage. I think this is honestly the best defense Clemson has played, even better than Georgia.
1,000%. Yeah.
I think this is the best defense Clemson will have faced this year. So I think ultimately, when I look at this side of the ball, with Cade Klubnik, making his homecoming, and all the obviously Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik obviously going against each other in high school at the highest level, state championship, like there's a lot of fanfare. But when you look at the matchup, there are a lot of things that scare me about Clemson's ability to especially generate points against this Texas defense. I'm going to let you guys do it because you guys are the experts. But kind of break down just what makes this Texas defense so so special. Because honestly, they are one of the best units I've watched of any team this season. So I would just take the floor.
Yeah, I would say number one for me is the athleticism. There isn't anyone on that field that I'm like, you know what, that guy's a bad athlete. And Sark fixed that from last year. Like, no offense, we had guys last year that just had no business being on the football field at Texas. They just didn't. I'm not going to call them out by name. Texas fans, you know who I'm talking about, but they just didn't belong. And these guys do. Like, our most unathletic guy is Michael Taff, and he plays with some of the most heart you'll see in college football. And that just dude, Brooks Austin. So if anyone knows him on YouTube, I'm pointing him out. And he gave him the perfect name, the Gruden grinder. John Gruden has his Gruden grinder. That's who that guy is. Michael Taff is awesome. And then they play with great communication. If you look at Texas defense, anything that the offense does to adjust, immediately you see the linebackers and secondary immediately look at each other, giving hand signals or talking and letting each other know where to go. And then they're really good at rallying to the football. You will never see one guy get there and that's it. You're going to see 4 to 5 guys running full out, all out, going after the football and making plays happen. Perfect example of that in game, Arkansas. Alfred Collins tries to knock down a screen pass versus Arkansas. He immediately, as soon as he doesn't knock down that screen, turns around, runs as fast as he can, strips the ball carrier, and there's 3 or 4 other longhorns there to jump on the football. That's the difference in this team. And you see that they play with an intensity, they play with a passion, and they're super athletic. And when you come together like that on defense is like that in any sport, by the way. If you see a really good defense, usually those guys love to play defense. They're out there working their ass off, and they're usually athletic as well. And that's what this defense is.
I don't want to oversimplify it, but like defense is pretty simple when it comes to like you play good fundamentals. You don't kind of try to extend. You don't try to do too much, and you play. That's how you play really good defense. And I honestly think that's a lot of what Texas has been able to do is just play really good defense. If you look back to some of those Tom Herman defenses, they were doing too much. They were missing tackles. They weren't using their bodies well. And that's been the big change for me. It's just like the little things make a big difference on defense. How they're using their bodies to get in front of the ball carrier, using their whole body rather than just their arms to make tackles, rallying to the football. You talked about Clemson struggling to set edges. Texas has set better edges than I've seen in a very long time. You've got a guy, Trey Moore, who came in from UTSA as a transfer as an edge, and he put up double-digit sacks last year, and Texas fans were kind of like, oh, he's only got like 3 or 4 sacks this year. That guy does all of the dirty work that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. He's like the king of keep my outside arm free, keep my eye on the ball, nobody's coming back this way. It's just those little things in defense that make the difference for Texas. And I think a lot of it comes down to that. You mix that with the level of athleticism they have. They've upgraded athleticism in the trenches. It's hard to say that they've upgraded fully because like you lose 2 guys in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft to tackle. It's hard to like upgrade from that. But you know, you've got Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, 2 guys are really high ceiling guys that came in and flashed a bit early. They've kind of taken a step up and really been those like senior stalwart guys in the middle. It doesn't hurt that you add Colin Simmons, 5-star all-world, probably could go pro in 2 years rather than 3 if you really wanted to. But like, it's just you combine the athleticism with just playing good, fundamentally sound. Like Pete Kwiatkowski is just an old school fundamental defensive coach, and they kind of take on that personality of their coach.
Yeah, and other coaches have said this in the press conference, like, what do they do? Is like, you know, they kind of just line up and play football because they just have the guys to do that. Like, they just play cover 2, cover 3 and say, beat us. And no team yet has really done that. So they're really good, man. They're really – honestly, they're way more fun to watch than our offense.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, they got a ton of chemistry, I think, on that side of the ball from guys that played together at the high school level or at least knew each other pretty well at the high school level and have trained in the off season and things like that. It's hard to see number 4 out there for the Texas Longhorns and Andrew Makuba.
He tried to kill someone in your honor last week, so you're all good.
Yeah, I saw that, and I respect 100% what he did. It was awesome to see. It's not going to be awesome to see when he's out there executing at an elite level against the Clemson Tigers. That's going to be unfortunate. He's probably, I mean, when we're talking about, and not to take this to the transfer portal or to get off topic or anything like that, but to just talk about like probably the best player that Clemson's lost via the transfer portal, Andrew Makuba might be that guy.
Yeah.
He's definitely the biggest loss that Clemson's probably had since the advent of the transfer portal and since Clemson has been losing players every single year to the transfer portal. We tend to lose backups and guys that, you know, are looking for a better opportunity or more snaps or something like that. We don't tend to lose Andrew Makuba. So it'll be both fun and agonizing to watch him perform against this Clemson Tiger offense when it comes to this Saturday 4 p.m. kickoff. But talking about this Texas defense, a stat that I ran across was just kind of crazy to me, and I still don't 100% believe it. I don't want to believe it, but number 1 pass defense, obviously in the nation, only allowed 4 touchdown passes this season. Do I have that correct?
I believe that is correct.
It is.
That's scary.
The fewest they've allowed since Darrell Royal played Bear Bright in the Cotton 1975.
I mean, we're talking about 2024 college football. And I know the arguments out there. And look, we're going to talk about some of them as we go on in this show and about how, you know, Texas hasn't necessarily faced the most potent of offenses around the country. But at the end of the day, if you're only allowing 4 touchdown passes over an entire season, I don't really care who you're playing. That's an elite level defense. That secondary is performing at an extremely high level. And as a Clemson fan, that's scary. Not going to lie. That's 100% scary. Cade Klubnik is going to have his work cut out for him. These wide receivers are going to have their work cut out for them. And I think ultimately it comes down to, can Clemson not become one-dimensional in this game against a very elite Texas defense? And if you've looked at this Clemson offense as we've gone throughout the season, we've had some really high highs and some really low lows. And part of those lows, unfortunately, have been against the better defenses that we have played so far. So tell me about a little bit more. I know you guys have sung the praises of this Texas defense. Tell me where this Texas defense may not be the greatest. Tell me where they are a little bit vulnerable on that side of the ball.
Occasionally, I think in the trenches they can get beat up a little bit in the run game, but it's not super often. Like, I mean, here's the example. It's not a great one, but we're number one defensively in the secondary with giving up explosive plays, so we don't give up explosive plays. Now, the run defense is still good. I think it's like we only give it up. We're number 10 in that category, so it is worse than the secondary. It's still good, but it's still but it is worse. Honestly, that's really it. Like, once in a while they'll give up an explosive run. Honestly, though, the only guy that's been able to do it consistently is on Georgia. Trevor Etienne has had most of that. I don't really think there's any other running back that's been able to do it, but that is the weakness, if you want to call it, of the Texas defense.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
I think they struggle a bit when things go off, like too off schedule. Like Diego Pavia had a pretty solid game against Texas because he plays, and I call it like naughty toddler football. He kind of just runs around and sees what breaks loose. And so I think the athleticism of Cade Klubnik scares me in that way because Cade Klubnik is a dude. I was mad that he did not stay in the state of Texas when he committed to Clemson. I was pissed off about that. I'll just be real with y'all. He and Andrew McCuber are two that really just stabbed me in the heart. But that's what worries me about the Clemson offense is that when push comes to shove, like Cade Klubnik is a dude, period, end of sentence. Like he can come out and he is good enough on any given Saturday to just go supernova and win a game for Clemson. And so I think his athleticism is something that worries me because, Diego Pavia is not on the level of Cade Klubnik. And I saw some of the things that Diego Pavia was able to do to the Texas defense. Now, Texas gave him the ball in some favorable situations, but a combination of Quinn Ewers throws a couple of bad interceptions. Cade Klubnik starts to feel himself a little bit. The offense starts to get going. Things can get really nasty.
And I think that's ultimately what is going to have to be the great equalizer for Clemson, I think, offensively in this game. I think Cade Klubnik is going to have to make Texas wrong even when they're right. With the struggles of especially within the last month or so with running the football for Clemson, which obviously does not bode well, when you're going up against a defense of the caliber of Texas. But, with Phil Maffa being extremely limited with, his shoulder and, your backup running back, Jay Haynes, tearing his ACL in the ACC championship game, like there's pretty slim pickings as far as who to go to. I mean, you'll probably see a bit of Keith Adams Jr. He's more of the Phil Maffa type bruiser. He's not going to, he's not going to break off a 60-yard run for a touchdown, and he's not that kind of back. You might see some of true freshman David Iziamume, who redshirted this year, but of course, with the new rules, he can play in the postseason. So I think the quarterback run game I think is going to have to be the wrinkle that Clemson leans on at least somewhat in this game, because you don't want to put Cade Klubnik in too many situations where he can take hits, because this Texas defense has some thumpers. But I think you're going to have to run him in this football game, because I think just the limitations in the run game, and with the offensive line not generating as much push as they were earlier in the season, especially since you're going against a defensive line the caliber of Texas, it's going to be Cade Klubnik is going to have to make some things happen in this game, and whether it's in the run game or creating and escaping pressure, there are going to be guys in his face. He's going to have to win at that point, and the receivers, you got to trust them. You got to win your one-on-ones. Clemson has a talented but young crop of receivers that is going up against arguably the best secondary in the country. So there's not going to be a lot of plays, but you're going to have to make them anyway. And that's just, I think that's some of these guys are going to have to grow up. And Antonio Williams is obviously the guy that I think Texas needs to be worried about the most. I'm locking in on him because he's Cade's safety blanket. He's been the most consistent receiver for Clemson. He's really talented route runner and probably the best on the team at just getting separation. And then, the young receivers in Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore, they're going to have to play at a really high level as well. And at tight end, Jake Brenningstool, I think he's going to have to play a role in this, a big role in this game, because I think, just having an athletic tight end can make things, be a lot easier on you. And I feel like at some points this year, they have not really emphasized him as much in the offense as I would like. So he's going to have to play at an extremely high level as well, because I don't think this offensive line for Clemson is going to just be able to straight up win their one-on-ones in this game, if I'm being honest. So you're going to have to create some plays off platform.
Yeah, I think another example, Gerald hit on Diego Pavia, Dylan Gabriel last year. Our defense wasn't as good last year, but it's not about the design run plays for the QB. It's the off-script run plays for the QB. If Cade Klubnik is able to get out of the pocket on his own, create whatever he needs to through the air or just on the ground in little chunks, I think that does scare me a little bit. And I said on our show, I think for Clemson to win this game, I think you're looking at a stat line for Cade Klubnik of like 225 yards passing and 50 to 75 yards rushing. I think if that's in the cards, I think Clemson has a pretty good chance of winning the game.
You also had to remind me, I forgot Bryant Wesco was there, man. That's another one I wish stayed in the state of Texas. That dude, like,
he's good, man.
That's why I keep saying it. Like, Clemson has dudes. Like, it is what it is. Like, 10-3 might be a disappointing season, but like, Clemson has dudes. Like, they've got athletes. They didn't forget how to coach in Columbia, South Carolina. And with 2 weeks to plan and prepare, like, there's a lot that can go well for that offense. And I hate playing a Riley off rest. We did it for years with Lincoln Riley. Now we got Garrett Riley in the playoffs. Like, I'm not like those dudes can dial up an offense. And Clemson, again, feels like the dumb way to say it. Like, they've got the Jimmies and Joes. So if the X's and O's are there, things can go well.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly got dudes on the Clemson side of the ball, no doubt about it. You mentioned a Bryant Wesco. You mentioned a Cade Klubnik. We got Harris Sewell. We got all these guys coming home to Texas. So there is those storylines of guys playing with a little bit of extra motivation because they are coming home. And R.J. Mickens.
R.J. Mickens, man.
Our best safety, our best secondary piece all season, has been for probably 2 seasons at Clemson. He's coming home as well. We got tons of guys. Ian Reed, I think, obviously coming home as well. So there's a ton of Texas ties on this Clemson Tigers team. And I think that lends a little bit of extra to the game as well, and definitely makes some fun storylines. But, to your guys' point, I think probably the biggest X factor on the Clemson Tigers team as far as the offensive side of the ball is Cade Klubnik. He's going to have an absolutely heroic game. He's going to have an amazing game in order for Clemson to win this game. Make no mistake about it. He's going to have to be able to do it with both his legs and his arm. He's going to have to be able to do it off script. He's going to have to Jordan's point, make this Texas defense wrong even when they're right. And that's going to be probably the key to Clemson winning this game. It worries me because, our 1,100-yard back, our absolute animal in the backfield has been banged up. He needs off-season surgery. He's got a torn labrum. He's been dealing with it for probably the past 4 to 5 weeks. It's getting worse and worse seemingly every single week. And we lose our number 2 guy, Jay Haynes, behind him last week where he tore his ACL. He had surgery this past week. So the running back room is definitely a question mark. How healthy is a Phil Maffa? How effective can he be in this game? I think goes a long way in determining how successful this Clemson offense is. And then those young guys, can they step up? Can a Easy E step up? Can a an Adam step up? Can those guys step up and become that stopgap between a Phil Maffa and taking over for that 2 spot of Jay Haynes? And can they shoulder some of that load? That remains to be seen. I think we got athletes. I think we got guys that can get it done. But at the end of the day, this is this is the best defense that Clemson will face or has faced this season to date. So it's going to be super interesting. It's going to be kind of a chess match. Again, Garrett Riley is going to have to scheme these guys open. He's going to have to create plays where there's not plays. You're not going to be able to just line up and run base stuff all the time. You're going to have to kind of do some stuff that throws this Texas defense off, because they have been so elite for the entire season. And you've seen what they've done to a Georgia offense. You've seen what they've done to a guy who was absolutely elite last season in a Carson Beck, who they made look pretty pedestrian all season. Although they lost to Georgia twice, Carson Beck has not looked good in either of those games. So you got to credit that Texas defense, and it's going to be super interesting. So kind of to wrap this thing up, guys, I think what are the keys to the game for this Texas team on the offense and defensive side of the ball? If Texas were to be successful against this Clemson Tigers team, which is the betting favorite, right? They still are a 12.5+ point favorite over the Clemson Tigers. What are their keys to the game in order to have a successful outing this coming Saturday in Austin, Texas, when they take on the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, so when you get down in the red zone finish, I mean, another game that comes to mind, Texas A&M, we're up 17-0. We throw that pick six. We go down there again to go up 24-7 at least. Then Quinn Ewers fumbles. If we don't do either of those things, at worst, it should have been 23-0. So you got to finish when you get in the red zone. Number 2, Bert Auburn, my brother, you got to make some field goals. We got to make field goals when we at 40 and under. You got to make them. Anything over that, you know what? Fine, flip a coin. But yeah, he's just been so inconsistent this year. And when we get in these type of games, every point matters. So we need to kick and make our field goals. And then if we're going to turn the ball over, at least don't do it on our side of the field. In that first Georgia game, turned it over, 4 times on our side of the field. They had like 4 or 5 drives that started inside our own 35-yard line. So if you're going to turn it over on the other side of the field, honestly. At this point, I expect the Texas team to turn the ball over. I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when they do it. Can it not be in a critical moment? And then can it not be on a critical point on the field as well? So those are my 3 keys to the game.
Yeah. First of all, I want to apologize. This is something really inappropriate before. I said Columbia. I know it's not Columbia. I was just rolling. My kids woke me up super early this morning. I didn't mean to cuss y'all like that. I'm sorry.
You had Tiggs irate in the chat. Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry.
You gonna set these Clemson Tigers off calling them?
that is a slur. I know that, and I'm sorry. I did not mean to offend anybody. I do my best. I'm sorry. My son woke me up at like 5:45 this morning, so we're trying the best we can. I think the keys for me, Matthew said it really well, but I really think, if Texas can get out of their own way offensively, like don't turn the ball over. Just like play fundamental football. Like don't turn the ball over. Don't make dumb mistakes. Texas has a lot of procedural penalties as well on the offensive line. So if the offensive linemen can hold their water, like just play solid football. Don't do anything too much. You don't have to do a whole lot. The defense. This is no shot at anybody. The defense only given up more than 17 points like 3 times this year, and twice was to Georgia. So like if you can put up 24 points, generally the defense is going to do enough for you to win the game. So like just don't get in your own way, don't shoot yourself in your own foot, and run the ball. Like I'm old school, like run the ball, run the outside zone, find those creases, hold on to the football when you can. Defensively, I think it's going to be contained Cade Klubnik. I think he is like I said, too talented to not go off at times in this game, especially in front of the home crowd. Getting the rematch with Quinn Ewers from the state championship game. Like he's got Quinn's gonna have to throw it at one of his old teammates. You mentioned R.J. Mickens. They played on the same team, played on the state championship team. They're at Southlake, so like Cade Klubnik's gonna want to put on a show, and I don't blame him. Like, come home and try to win the games. I think containing him, keeping him, and keeping the lid on his talent, because like I said, he is a talent. He's an incredible talent. He's gonna play in the NFL. So like if you can contain Cade Klubnik defensively, keep him from going too off script, and keep the offense from shooting itself in their own foot. That's kind of my two big keys.
Jordan, your keys to the game?
Yeah, I think for Clemson, I think defensively, I'll start defensively. You guys mentioned the turnover issues with Texas. I think Clemson is going to have to force it would not just force turnovers, but win the turnover margin. That's something that, as up and down as this team has been this season, that is something they've done extremely well. I believe they're number 3 in the country in turnover margin. They don't turn the ball over much, and they've done a good job at forcing turnovers, as maligned as this defense has been a lot of the year. So I think you're going to have to get those in this game. You're going to have to steal possessions, because I think for Clemson offensively, they just have not shown that they can generate enough offense against the better defenses they've played, by themselves. And so I think, you saw in the SMU game and the ACC championship game, they're the reason they were able to get, that early 21-7 lead midway through the second quarter, was because the defense created short fields, on turnover. TJ Parker had on SMU's first drive, he had the strip sack fumble on SMU's side of the field. Then, you have the interception by Khalil Barnes. Like, you need to have those type of havoc plays in this game. And I know that's the key for basically any football game, winning the turnover margin. But I think for Clemson in this matchup, especially because I think they're somewhat outmanned on the lines of scrimmage. I think they need to create short fields for this offense. And Cade Klubnik, he's going to have to make plays and like I said, make Texas wrong defensively, even when they're right. And the receivers, they got to win. They got to win. They got to win one-on-ones, because Texas is going to. They have the utmost confidence in their dudes, and for good reason. And I think you have to be the aggressor, and you have to be the one that makes them pay for that. And so for Clemson, it's very simple, because I don't think they're going to be able to just run it down Texas's throat, especially since with the issues at running back right now. And Cade Klubnik is going to have to be special with his legs and with his arm. Ultimately, that's if Clemson does those things, which they haven't done against the best teams on their schedule this year, they're going to have to do something they haven't done all season. That's your path to victory. You got to make Texas has got to make mistakes, and you have to capitalize at a level that you haven't done, frankly, a lot of this season. No, I think all that makes sense. Obviously, everything starts on the line of scrimmage. In major college football and Division I college football, everything is predicated off the line of scrimmage. So Clemson obviously has to dominate the line of scrimmage. Creating turnovers, Jordan, you covered that perfectly. Clemson has to have turnovers in this game. They just do. They got to create short fields, especially against this defense. Stop the run, and Cade Klubnik has to have one hell of a game. That's Clemson's path to victory. Stop the run, Cade Klubnik have a hell of a game, create turnovers. That's kind of Clemson's path to victory. It's absolutely going to be a crazy matchup. Is anybody going to the game this Saturday? I'm not going.
I got kids, 3 kids to put through college, so I unfortunately cannot.
Yeah, no,
I get you. I feel you. The way my bank account is set up, I got a checking and a savings.
But all the money's
all
in my
the money
savings.
is in my savings. Those of you that know, that's pretty good.